What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast for a very special episode today. But before we get into it, Mike, how are you going today?
Listen, I'm usually excited, but today I'm even more excited. So, yeah, well, let's see what we got cooking up today.
Yep. Well, very, very excited to announce. Today we've got ourselves one of the authors involved in the High Republic Publishing Initiative, including the High Republic Adventures, Trail of Shadows, and the latest YA edition, Midnight Horizon. He's also the author of Last Shot. He's a Forlom and Zuckuss enthusiast, and just an overall cool guy. It's Daniel Jose Older. How you going, man?
Yay!
Hello.
What's going on? Thanks for having me.
Thank
No
you for
worries.
coming.
Yeah, so good to have you here. Mike, you've just read Midnight Horizon. Let's talk about it.
Listen, uh, this just came out, and I'm excited for y'all to read it. I know I have so many things to say about this, but we'll dive into this later because we have all the questions cooking up here for
Ready?
Mr. Daniel Jose Older. So yeah, like I said, go read this. So Mr. Jose Daniel Jose Older, you have a talent for writing colorful and intricate characters like Crash, which has been which has been a character that you've created in this universe for the High Republic that has been like your favorite to write.
Everybody asks me this. I don't have a good answer because I really do love them all. It's so corny. It's like I know parents say that about their kids. Like I don't have a favorite. I love them all differently. That's exactly how I feel. Like, and depending on which I'm writing, I kind of get excited about that one. Like what caught me off guard was writing. Like how we all went off and sort of followed Farzala for a while, and then Court. Like I knew I was going to do that, but I didn't know what it would look like. So I kind of figured it out as I went, which is different from the rest of the run where I had it really planned out. So going off on those little side quests, I was like, man, I really love these kids. Like Farzala is so great and just kind, and like Court has this really wild backstory that I wasn't sure what it was going to be until I wrote it. So all that stuff. Sav Balagan is one of my favorites that I fell in love with writing her, and she came out of nowhere. She was going to be someone else, and then I couldn't use that character, and I was like, I guess I got to make up a new character. So Sav showed up, and then I was like, oh, she's really fun and chaotic. And then, to your point, Crash is definitely one of my new favorites. Also very chaotic. Like, I don't know. They're all really different, and I really, really love them all. I literally don't have a favorite.
Awesome.
For real. I got to say, my favorite of yours has got to be Ramjam.
Oh, thank you.
That guy is hilarious.
I do love
He's just
Ram.
like, he's what I feel like I'd be like as a Jedi. I just wouldn't care about all the prophecy. I'd just be there, just doing my stuff, doing my thing. But you just mentioned Court, actually, who is also a super cool character. I gotta ask, in the latest issues, we've seen his helmet. It's sort of, it's come off.
Yeah.
But he started speaking English all of a sudden.
Right.
Was that mask just muffling his speech the whole time, and all of a sudden he's free and can talk now? What's going on there?
That's so interesting. No, it's really like he's been paying attention all along, but it's a little bit like he was shy, and he just didn't have it in him to really step up and kind of like take that plunge to like, I don't know if you were like studying another language, but you can know it, but speaking it is a whole other thing, right? And it's a little bit of that. So, and you'll see that it's always very broken up with Alexian. Like he mixes it. But I also wanted to have kind of a bilingual character and to play with that where he does a little bit of this and a little bit of that. You can figure it out from context, but I needed to get him speaking a little bit of basic just so we could get a little more of like what he's thinking and what he's talking about. Because it's just really challenging to have a character that speaks no basic and constantly have to give context cues. Because Farzala speaks Alexian, right? They all do, so they get it. But then we have to have them being like, "You're right, Court. We should do that thing." It's like, man, that's just exhausting after a while. So I did want to break that, and it felt like that was the perfect time to do it. He has a major like power up moment, and it's like let's see what he's talking about now.
For sure. Yeah, I love when they're all like, can't remember what issue it is, but they're all like checking in and like they're saying like who's in their ships, and then Court just says like the names instead.
Right, and you just see the names. Yeah, I love Court.
Yeah. I do got to ask about the Adventures comics, which I've absolutely been loving the series so far. I've been reading since day one. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm excited to see how you're going to wrap it all up in the final issue, which is coming out Feb 22nd or something.
I think so, yeah.
yeah, something I'm really curious about, especially after reading the latest issue,
Hmm.
Lula and Zine. That relationship is interesting me quite a lot, I gotta say, because at first I thought they were just best friends,
Right.
but now all of a sudden they seem very connected within the Force. There
Hmm.
was talk of love at the end of the issue,
Hmm.
so is this some romantic feelings we've got going on? I don't know what you can and can't say here, but
Absolutely
I'm
romantic
curious.
feelings. Yes.
Yeah, right.
And at first they were just best friends, right? Like
Yeah,
they met in this very dramatic and intense situation, and they were both like, "What is happening? You know, who are you?" I think for Zine, it was like she had always been taught to hate these people, right? And suddenly
yeah,
these people come and they're saving her life, and then she also saves their life.
yeah,
And Lula's like, I've always been taught that like the Jedi Order is the only way. Like that's all she knows. That's all she wants to be. It's her entire trajectory. And then suddenly she meets somebody who uses the Force, so she understands her implicitly on all these different levels, but is also like totally not a Jedi, the opposite of a Jedi almost. So there are these, when it says collision course in the title of that first issue, that's really about them. They're on a collision course
yeah, right.
together, right? And in a good way, but also in a way that, you know, when you meet someone that just changes your life, like that's
Yeah,
what's happening, right? And it has always been the plan from the very beginning. I even sent in a memo to like Story Group and Mike, and I was like, look, this is what I want to do. I want this friendship to be a slow burn romance. And by the end of this phase, I want people to be shipping them. And then I want there to be a payoff where it's like, yes, this is actually what's happening. Oh my God, right? That's what I was hoping for. And that's what happened, but it's still amazing to me that actually happened.
yeah.
So that's
Nope.
what
I mean, honestly, yeah, it caught me off guard because, like,
good.
I mean, I loved it. I just never thought about it, but then all of a sudden, I was like,
Right.
"Oh, let's go!" Like,
If you look back now, you'll see that I was sliding in little hints
yeah,
all along the way. And sometimes
yeah,
people picked them up and they were like, "Are these true? Is that?" you know,
yeah,
and it
right.
worked out.
And
But
with every issue, everyone on Twitter was hounding you for questions like, "What's going on here?" So to see
and
that
I was like,
eventual payoff, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So
Like when Court hugged Geo, highlight of the series.
that was another moment I did have in my head. As soon as I read Geode in Into the Darkness, I was like, oh man, him and Court need a moment. And it needs to be a moment where Court, for me, I like that that's kind of open to interpretation, but in my mind in that moment, Court is giving Geode his entire life story. Like
Yeah,
he's just like, here's why I wear the mask, here's where my people are from, like because he never says more than like a line or two. And then suddenly it's like bang! And then he's like,
yeah,
man, Geode really understands me, and they just hug it out, you know?
for real.
no, that's beautiful, and I really feel that people should be reading, Star Wars Adventure comics or a book like Race to Crash Point Tower because you have people going out there, let's say older adults, they look at the covers of some of these, kind of kiddier looking stories and. They might like put it off and be like, I'm not gonna read that. It looks like it's just for the kids, but like you incorporate like so many like adult themes that even to me myself, what am I now, 23-year-old, I'm like, wow, that like really hit me and I could really connect to it. So when you do all that, like what's the process like and like what do you have in mind when trying to balance like trying to appease also the adult readers and trying to see that, hey, like this story you could totally relate to it as well.
Right. No, that's a great question because it is hard, right? But I always go back to like the original trilogy. Like the original trilogy is age appropriate for little kids. Like I watched it when I was a little kid, and it totally. But adults are obsessed with it, right? And that's great. Like that's exactly what you're kind of going for. The main issue with like writing for young people is that young people have to be at the center of it for me. So if I know like the first thing I do is basically figure out who is my like player set, right? Who are my characters that I'm going to deploy into this world? And I'm always going to be picking young people for the most part for the main roles in these stories. And then beyond that, like the problems that young people are dealing with are very relevant to the problems that older people are dealing with. They're very connected. It's just even more so, and I think it's heightened by the fact that you're also coming of age and you're going through those really tumultuous adolescent years. It just makes everything really intense because most of that stuff is happening for the first time, right?
Mhm.
And so that's why, Ram is going through it in the way he's going through it. And, Z, all of them are just going through it in this very particular adolescent way. But I certainly related to them. Like I was writing it from my own emotional experiences and from friends and listening to them and everything. And I feel like as long as I'm checking in with myself and I'm making sure it's a young people story about young people, then if I'm honest about the emotional impact of the events, and if I'm telling a really cool story with an awesome space battle at the end, like we have, then adults are going to enjoy it too. And they do.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of Ram, related to him so much. Especially during the pandemic, I just went back into my old ways, into my old shell. So
Right.
I was in my garage like Ram, just doing things just to avoid people, and seeing him going throughout this journey of reconnecting with people, and introducing himself to others. That really connected with me, because I felt like I went through a similar path throughout the past year. So that was.
I think a lot of us have, like, first of all, thanks for saying that. It's really good to hear, because that's what I was hoping. And that was true of me too. In a lot of ways, I'm still figuring out how to be back in the world, right? We've all been kind of hidden away. And I've heard that from so many different people on social media, that they connect to Ram on these different levels of just not knowing how to like people, and like sometimes it's because we forget, sometimes it's because of whatever else is going on for us. Who knows? There's a lot of reasons, but for whatever it is, and then finally, like, I just love, like, I love writing, and I love like hiding out of my little room and getting work done. Like, I enjoy it, and it's like, it's home to me. I also love people, but I need a break. And so when Ram is like, all of this pomp and circumstance, like all this crap that people are talking about, let me just go and fuss around with my little droids and everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I gotta ask, when writing literature aimed at like children, do you find yourself like when you're writing lessons in there, is that lessons that you feel like you've learned as a child because the children, the characters you're writing about are children, or is that more like adults?
It's totally stuff that I've learned. You're right. Lessons is one word for it, and it's true. I try to think of it less like lessons, because I don't want to come across like I'm teaching too much.
Yeah, right.
I do want to, like, I have been through a lot of things in life like everybody else, and I've learned a lot from them, and I want to like bring those experiences and the things I've learned to the page in a way that feels like it's conversatory and like inviting people into that conversation, because it's always a conversation, right? Like learning or growing or maturing or whatever it is, it always has to be in dialogue. And so if I'm just being like, here's the path, right? And this is what you do, like, it's gonna just close people down. But if it's more like, I'm trying to figure this out too, but here's what I've learned from my struggles, and I know I still have struggles ahead, and I'm doing my best, right? If that's the approach I have, which it is, I think that invites people into it more. And Star Wars is a great way to do that, right? The Jedi Order is a complicated thing, and all the Jedi, especially in the High Republic, are really trying to figure it out, and no one has the answers. Kantam has one understanding, Comac has another, and that's not even to start with all the kids, right? And they're all trying to figure it out. So my thing is, like, if we're all trying to figure out together, it's not going to be like, here's the path. It's going to be like, here's a bunch of different paths. And you'll see, Ari, when you get to Midnight Horizon, how Reith's journey particularly speaks to that exact concept, because that's one of the main kind of themes, is this idea of like, how do you find your path, right?
Yeah, definitely. Also, I gotta ask, I don't know if this is like a lesson, but I just love the way you've shown like how important like comfort is, and like how important it is to comfort your friends and stuff.
Definitely.
And one of my favorite moments in the High Republic, not just High Republic, in Star Wars, was in Race to Crash Point Tower. The hug, and even in Adventures, all the hugs, and in Trail of Shadows 3, there was a hug at the end of that. I was just like,
there's a lot of
hugging. About the hugs, and I love it.
It's so funny because I've become known for that, and I didn't set out to do that. I wasn't like, Jedi need to hug more, but Jedi do need to hug more. Like, damn,
exactly.
It's true. And there's so much going on in the galaxy at this point, and there's so much going on in the world, in this world, and like, people do need comfort. It's funny, the whole Bake Off thing happened because of that. Like, Zine, the idea of Zine coming to Starlight and being torn out of her world, which was basically destroyed, and having her best friend torn away from her, all this trauma she's going through. I really wanted to create Starlight as like a place of comfort around her, where she was feel safe and feel at home and feel embraced. Also, especially like her coming to terms with her own Force use and coming from a place where that wasn't okay. I really wanted to create this world where she would feel like loved for who she was. That was so important. So part of that is obviously baked goods, like, who wouldn't be like, feel safer with Yoda showing up with a bunch of baked goods that he baked, right? So it was literally just that, like an offhand comment, and then putting it in the art, and then it kind of building on that, and then eventually it was like, well, we got to do a Bake Off.
That has been so memed in the Instagram community. I see that picture everywhere, on Twitter. I'm like, well, you see Yoda with a tray. Well, you framed that.
That should, man. It's great. And then Court shows up with the little cups in a different one.
Oh,
Like,
right.
taking care of people, it's like comfort food. Like we all need it,
For
right?
real. For real.
See, and I think that's why I've appreciated like your sense of humor in like in the writing. Like I'm telling you guys, Midnight Horizon. There again, there's just this style that you do. Listen, everyone can be funny. Well, it takes talent, but the way you do it, it's like,
Thank you.
oh my gosh, the setup and the flow and the way we get to the line. Like I'm talking about one of my favorite scenes in this, not even comedic, just whole scenes, is the Gomorian guard scene in that. No spoilers, but that was I had to reread that 3 times. I think I tweeted you out, but I was like, I had to reread that 3 times because it was that funny to me.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. I forgot about that scene until we pulled it to be one of the excerpts. It's one of my favorite scenes too. Like I laughed when I was writing it. And it's when doesn't she call him an excellent pig? And
yes.
They just insult each other's ancestors for like 5 minutes. And he's like, "Oh, you're my friend." Like, I was like, this is going to be a wild ride. I didn't know what was going to happen going into it. So it was one of those ones that I was finding out as I wrote it. Like, okay, this is funny. Like, this is going to be good.
That was perfect. That was perfect.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, you just brought it up. But speaking of your sense of humor, I got to ask. I mean, you kind of just explained, but what inspires you to write something like Galactic Bake Off Spectacular, which was just so fun and quirky, and like
Totally.
I love how you sort of just set out to like have fun with a lot of what you write, and it definitely comes off when reading. It's just like, this is just fun, man. Like this is just so much fun. And then also I got to ask, how do you burn water? Because in issue 8 of Adventures, Lou is getting made fun of for like burning water or something. I was like, what? Also Ram saying wizard, gonna learn to beg is an awesome quote.
Thank you. All of that. I appreciate it. With the other piece about the Bake Off though, is that I was very aware of when it would come out in the context of the end of phase 1 and how bad things are and how bad things, like just the whole mess of it, right? So again, like on the level of like similar to the origin of the idea of baking, like the finale of it, the Bake Off itself comes at a time when like now everybody's down, everybody needs some comfort, right? And even though in story world it happens right before the Great Rumble Race, the Great Jedi Rumble Race, which is another moment of levity that we all needed. But it was really like, it came out in January, which is right around Fallen Star. And I knew that the Fallen Star is a heavy book. It's an amazing book. It's heavy. And people are going to be struggling with it in terms of like, a lot of people are dying and it's a lot. So it was like this moment to kind of have a little bit of balance and just have some happy baking. An issue where like, yeah, things are, there's danger and there's an adventure, but you're not going to lose a major character in there. So there's like a little bit of balance to everything going on elsewhere in the galaxy.
Yeah, for sure. And not a question, however, I've got to say, the crossover page between Adventures and Trail of Shadows, with Ram running through, I was like, let's go, because I read Trail of Shadows second, and I was like, yes, I love this. But speaking of Trail of Shadows, I just really want to touch on that. So the character Emmerich Kaftor, is that how you say his name? He's been so cool to read. What's the idea behind like a detective Jedi? I gotta ask.
Yeah. With Emmerich, like as we've already seen, kind of happening in his in the most recent issue, he's going through it. Like he gets very close to one of the creatures, and it's
better be all right. By the way,
I hope so. Yeah, but I knew that's where his journey would take him. Right, was facing one of these creatures. And so I wanted to build him up towards that as like just a very unshakable presence, like someone who is just like cool, calm, and collected in a way that all the other Jedi kind of aspire to be. Sav is a little bit like that too, but in a totally different way. And they're kind of interesting, I think, comparisons in a certain aspect. But with Sav is just like chaotic. She's like, I just don't care, right? Emmerich is like, I care a lot, but I do it in a way that's like very controlled. And like, he's like, you can tell he meditates and he really is like one with the Force on this very particular level. And, I needed to start there so that we could break it down piece by piece and take him apart basically. But also not just in the sense of like, oh no, he's dealing with the leveler, but also in the sense that like, he's now very, very close to someone, right? And he has to deal with that intimacy in a way that still feels true to who he is in his path as a Jedi Master. And those are all just kind of complicated conflicts, but also, sources of tension, yes, but also sources of power for him that we'll sort of just see where they go. But knowing that it would go there, I wanted to start somewhere very different so that we would have a journey.
Yeah, right. I actually just read the preview pages to issue 5 as well, though. Just got put out on Stars.com. But also with Emmerich, is he like almost a new addition to like the Ava, Elza, Stellan trio? Because he was sort of mentioning them in one of the issues. Was he sort of like the outsider of the group or something like
It
that?
was more like they all came up together, and he just, everyone was an outsider except those three to them.
Yeah, right. Okay.
They had their crew, and everyone else was like, wow, there's the crew. Not in a bad way. I don't think they were cliquish. I think they were just really tight. And folks were like, oh, they got their thing going on, like whatever that is.
Yeah. Yeah, they even talk about it like Emmerich's just like, yeah, don't ask. It's a weird little triangle going on there. Yeah.
You know what's weird though? Reith Silas. He went from fighting Drengir to fighting some things about growing up. I don't know. I feel every time I read about Reith Silas, I'm always like learning something, and I always feel his vulnerability. So like, I know. Listen, Claudia Gray did an amazing job writing Reith. So I was like, oh, like hopefully we keep that like that consistency. And Midnight Horizon, Chef's Kiss. It's that vulnerable Reith Silas,
Right.
and he still has to like climb the ladder of like all these challenges, and like he's always talking within himself and being like, don't freak out, what's gonna happen next, I'm gonna figure it out. So I really, and Reith is another one that I'm just like, man, high praise. So you wrote him, and you wrote him very excellently, and it was very consistent with our introduction to him. What's it like incorporating other people's characters or into your stories, and making sure you have that like consistency, but also expand on their character and give us like they're growing up, they're learning.
Right. Thank you for that. I appreciate it a lot, because that was actually probably the hardest part of the whole book, because it is someone else's character, right? Like I can write my characters upside down and sideways with my eyes closed, but Reith is really like someone else's guy. And I wanted to respect that, but I also knew I couldn't be too cautious. And like, that's another, that like you can mess up by being like, I'm just going to do whatever I want with him. And you can mess up by being like, oh, this is someone else's guy, I don't want to like do anything too serious, right? So without spoilers, certain of the bigger things that happened to him in the book, I did like, the main one, I did like hit up Claudia immediately. I just was like, okay, so this is what I want to do. Is that cool? Out of respect for her, and because I didn't know if she had something planned for that moment or not. So I hit her up, and she was like, oh, absolutely, that's great. And then I hit up the editors and told them that's what I wanted to do. And once I kind of had that established in terms of a beginning and an end point, once I had that established as an end point, I really needed a beginning point. And for that, I really just reread the main thing I did, the most important thing I did, and you'll see it because it's right there in the first page of his arc in the book, is I reread that where he ends at the end of Claudia's book. He does show up for sure in Justina's work, and he has his own travels and travails and everything. But I really connected to that moment that he lands on at the end of Into the Darkness, in terms of like his journey as a Jedi. That just felt like such a pivotal moment in his growing up that I wanted to use that as a starting point and see where it took us. So then I had my starting point and my ending point. The next challenge was like voice, right? Because my voice tends to be a lot more kind of casual than Reith. And that was one of the harder things to work. Most of my Padawans are like, just a little more like lax about language and general things or whatever. And so, yeah, I had to sort of figure out how to get that voice right, which was hard. But fortunately, that's also what editors are for. So there would be moments when I would slide into my old kind of like vernacular that works for my characters, but not as well for Reith. And they would be like, I feel like Reith would say it like this. And so that's how writing is really teamwork.
Oh, okay. And I mean, yeah, like I said, it's so funny you brought that moment up. How you have your own younglings doing their own things, Padawans, and then you have Reith. Reith is always sticking out, not badly, but it's just like you could tell his structure and the way he was brought up, and you just have all these little kids just messing around. How you said loose with language. I love that. I love that he just stands out.
Yeah, it's a tension, right? But then I also knew immediately, like, him and Ram are gonna be best friends.
Yes.
Like, that's no question. All you have to do is put them in a spaceship together and let them go to town, and they're just gonna be,
there was no spoilers, but there was just a moment where you just ended off on, yeah, we're gonna play, and then it just picks up later, and they're like having this whole moment. That was amazing, amazing.
And Comac is like, oh my god.
Yes, they were. Yes,
Yeah,
yes, exactly.
that was fun. Like having the adults around and having them kind of like deal with the youngling, with the Padawans, be a little bit annoyed, but also really enjoy it. And that the Padawans bring a lot of lightness to the room. But then immediately, of course, things get really heavy and serious. And they also had to split up, right? That was really important to me. I know like there's a lot of hunger out there for like master and apprentice stories, and I get that. And that's great when they happen. For me, like especially writing a YA novel, it really is important that the young people go off on their own, right? And that's why, like, it's almost a trope. It's like a cliche, and they talk about a lot of young adult novels outside of Star Wars how they're always dead parents, because, and then there's a reason for that. It's because like the young people have to be making decisions on their own, and for a long time, like the go-to move for that was like the solution was to just kill all the parents, right? That's where we got Harry Potter. So I didn't want to kill off parents. You know, with the Jedi, it's obviously different because you have masters and Padawans, but I still needed to separate them. But it turned out like there was the solve was also to have like a whole side mission that Kantem and Comac are going to do, and to have Kantem talk about some of their past and everything else. Sorry, Ari.
No, it's just getting me excited, especially the fact that Ram's in the book, because I wasn't even too sure. But then I'm looking at this cover here that Mike's put on our nice little display space. I'm like, give me some more Ram.
Ram has, without spoiling, Ram has the coolest Star Wars moment I've ever written in this book.
Ooh,
okay. Better than the hug?
What?
Is it?
Is
it better than the hug?
Better than a hug.
Yeah, okay.
It's woo. I'm still like, oh man, that was wild.
Yeah.
You'll see. You'll know what I'm talking about.
Speaking of wild, though, you know, we've had you and the other awesome authors have talked about how the High Republic has happened to be, you know, somewhat of a reflection of what's going on in the real world and stuff like that. And you definitely could tell what some of the vibes are and stuff. But going forward with more stories, more High Republic stories, what current day events are you looking at, or you know, to use as inspiration for future stories?
Oh, you know, that's such an interesting question. I don't know the answer exactly. Like, I can't say that. It's like you said, like there's a lot of reflection in what's happening today in a lot of levels, but it wasn't planned that way actually. Like we already had the story set and all the big beats of it and everything else that was already set before the pandemic happened. So it sort of just happened that way, you know. Tragically, honestly, that like we lined up so well with the world. I think we might have leaned into it in our own personal writing in a different way. You know, each of our projects, we had our own versions of dealing with that, but I don't know how much it actually changed about what's in the stories. And it's so complex, right? It's like you're always reflecting the world around you, and you have to do it intentionally. Because if you don't, you'll do it badly, right? Mm-hmm. On the other hand, like I know it's the challenging balance of it is like I don't want it to feel so much so that you're pulled out of the galaxy far, far away and into this world, right? So it's like you're always balancing those different things. I think the best way I try to think about it is like what I'm pulling from is the emotion of the moment rather than the events of the moment, right? That's why like it's not a pandemic that they're dealing with, it's an attack from a bunch of space Vikings. But what they are dealing with that everyone can relate to, I think, is seeing the world suddenly fall apart around you and be much less safe than you thought it was. Even if you didn't even think it was that safe to begin with, now it's a whole lot less safe. And so that's, you know, it's the emotion of that sense of like danger that now is with us whenever we leave the house, right? Those are the different levels, especially with the young people that I was trying to look at.
Awesome.
For sure. Yeah, I gotta say, even in Light of the Jedi, because that was like the first High Republic thing I read, which I think was what most people read first.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my God, this is what has just been going on in the world for the last year. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Totally.
But speaking of Light of the Jedi in this era, pretty clearly distinguished from those we know in the prequels. What do you think like the biggest difference is, and like why do you think that's important? You know, and also in issue 7 of Adventures, I can't remember who it is, but someone says this is what it means to be a Jedi. It means we see the bigger picture. And I was like,
I think it was Obertuck. That sounds like
the
Marzala's master
guy. Yeah.
I love that guy. Yeah, I think it is actually the very concept that everyone sees the Force differently, that we've seen
Yeah.
kind of throughout the initiative, not just the Force, but the Order, right? Everyone has a different understanding of the kind of tenets of the Order, what it means to be a Jedi. And that in itself is very different than what we see in the prequels era, where it's like, this is what it means to be a Jedi. Here are the rules. Here are the guidelines. If you break those rules, you're a heretic. And that's the hard line that we're, which ultimately is what brings them down, really. Like that they are so rigid on this one particular path that they can't see what's right in front of them, and the threat really doesn't manifest itself through that. So I do think the High Republic Jedi are better.
I think they are as well.
Me too.
Less likely. I think you've talked about it before. I've heard you say, like, if Anakin was to, grow up in this era of Jedi, it's
Right.
like could have been a very different story.
I haven't said that personally, but it's true, and a lot of people have said
awesome.
it based on
Yeah.
like Zine's, in particular, Zine's path, because she was a little bit older when she came across the Jedi, right? And they're not treating her like a heretic, but they didn't treat Anakin that way, but until later, right? But also, we're seeing a lot of just the emotional journeys of everybody.
Yeah, maybe Anakin just needed a hug.
I think so. And some baked goods. And some baked goods.
Yeah, exactly.
And baked goods. No, even as you're saying, like when I was reading Race to Crash Point Tower and Ram gives Zine his lightsaber, I was like, you would not see that happening in anywhere near like where we were in the prequels. I was like, wow, that is so cathartic. Like I was just moved by that. That was awesome.
Oh, that's great. It's such a small moment, but you're right. It matters a lot. And like I remember writing it and being like, are they gonna let me get away with this? But like it's totally a necessity, right? Like he's the guy that's gonna fix the mechanical stuff, and she's the one holding off the attack. So, just hold this, right?
Yeah, exactly. It works.
They're practical people at the end of the day, especially Ram.
Definitely. And we get some more awesome Ramness in this book.
Yes.
So as we were talking about earlier, Midnight Horizon hit physical and digital shelves on Tuesday, February 1st. For me, I've read it. Thank you to the awesome folks at Disney Press who were able to snag me a copy. But this book feels like a mystery thriller at times, espionage type story that has all the adrenaline that you need when reading a book. Usually I need my coffee and maybe, maybe like a mineral water while I'm reading a book so I could like perk up. Whenever I would get into this, it was just running through the streets of Corellia, and I was just all in for it. It was all in. By the way, loved all the Corellia nods. Like you just know the inner workings of the entire thing. It felt like I was back in the solo movie in the beginning of the story. I was just transported back there. So amazing job. But also, it has its calming moments. It has these moments that you can like use as self-reflection. And honestly, it left me second guessing myself at times and being like, man, I should have really approached that situation in my life a bit more differently with some of the insight. So that was I love the way that you balance not just those self-reflection moments, but it just felt like an action thriller, as I said. And oh man, I was just eating up every single aspect of the story. So again, high praise to you. Everyone, go read it now. It's available. So first off, tell us about what we can expect for the people that haven't read it, what they can expect from this brilliant roller coaster. And then let us in on the secret of when we can see a Crash and Crew standalone story. We could call it like Crash and Crew, a Corellia story or something like that. But I'd love to see that.
First of all, I don't know if I can do a better job than you just did. Like that was a great rundown of the whole thing.
Thank you.
What can I add to that? That was perfect, Mike. That was great. I mean, I agree with you. I'll say that from the writer's point of view, I poured a lot of love into it. I poured a lot of excitement into it. It is very much a love letter to Star Wars, and it is the culmination of a year of storytelling on the adventure side, but you can pick it up alone. Like everything you need to know about all those characters is in the book itself. If you want the full emotional arc of everything and you want to like come in fully armed, read the Avengers, but you don't have to. And that's one thing I really set out to do. And from what my understanding from the readers who've read it, it seems like that's really hit home. So I'm proud of that. It is nonstop action, but it is also a slow burn on different levels in terms of the mystery. It's structured like a traditional mystery, right? It starts with a murder, and then the murder unravels to reveal much deeper problems, at the heart of it. it's definitely me being like, let me explore the streets of Corellia, because who wouldn't want to explore the streets of Corellia, right? Once I got leave to do that, basically I laid out for them, and we had a whole conversation about what Corellia would look like, several centuries before Solo, and the idea of it being at its height, like the rest of the galaxy, the golden age, and things going really well, and the culture and the politics and the lore. All of that, it was just fun. Like, to pull the threads that have been left to me in Solo and Most Wanted by Ray Carson, and to just build off it and then weave in my own stuff. Of course, there's going to be Grindelids. Of course, there's going to be Corellian Hounds. And this is actually what I had on my desk the whole time I was writing, to remind me of how great Corellian Hounds
is so awesome.
I know, I love this. This is like my little buddy to keep me focused and stuff. I wrote the book in 19 days because. Yeah,
wow. That's quick for a book, right? I'm not an author.
Quite quick. Yeah, that's
right.
Actually, it's insane.
Wow.
I was really excited about it. I was also on a deadline, and because of other projects, I couldn't start until about a month before that deadline. And so I was like, all right, I have a month to write the book. I documented the whole thing on TikTok, and I just every day I was just like, if I write 4,000 words a day, this book will get done in a month.
I remember those.
Yeah, that was this book, and I was just like, I have to just throw these words at the page. So I had to very carefully plot out the story and make sure I had a clear, not every single moment, but certainly had a clear idea of where everything was going to go. I knew that with that wide a slate of characters, it was going to be a fat book. Like there's a lot of story to tell, and I knew if I could weave them together right and land at this massive battle that was going to be really, really thrilling and really Star Wars, then it was going to work. And so I just set it up to work myself to get there, and there we were. So I love this book a lot, and it's been so great to hear the feedback like yours, Mike, and everyone online, and the appreciation has just really been incredible.
So
for sure.
Do yourself the favor and go read it, everyone.
Amen. That's right.
Yeah. Before we let you go, we just got to ask one last thing. So,
Sure.
the future of the High Republic. We've been told 150 years in the past. In Adventures, Mars mentioned the Battle of Jedha. Mike was just telling me before, we get similar nods in Midnight Horizon. Should we be expecting something there? And also, whatever you can say here, we're curious. Were you guys always aware you were going to go 150 years in the past? And why was that decision sort of made? I'm super curious.
The first part of the question, I have to defer to the GIF that Cav always puts up when people ask him things he can't answer, of Columbo being like, time will tell, it always does. Because time will tell, it always does. I will say, in a more vague way, not directly in response to that, but everything, not just those things, but everything in phase 1 means something. You know how Emmerich is like, everything is everything? Yeah. Everything is something and nothing is nothing? That's true of the High Republic. So there's stuff all throughout my run of Adventures, the main run of the Marvel, everything. There's stuff in there that are threads that will be pulled. I will just say that very mysteriously. But yes, it was always the plan. And that's one way that it was always the plan, is that we've been planting seeds from day one for stuff that will play out throughout the rest of the initiative. And I don't know if I could speak to the why of it exactly, because it's always just been true, but it does, there's a precedent for jumping back in time, which is the prequel trilogy, right? And there's a certain element of it that is kind of a echo of that, I think, in a cool way. And I have to say that coming up on it from a storyteller point of view, I always loved the idea, and there is certainly a risk, right? And that's what I like about it. Like, you're really asking people to invest in these characters for a whole year, and then divest enough to go to a whole new era, and who knows what'll happen, especially ending on certain cliffhangers that we end on. That's a lot to ask of an audience, and I feel like the response to that announcement was so positive, and it was such a reinforcement that we're really doing our jobs right, because people are excited to trust 100%. Us to develop a whole new era that's going to connect to this era, and then we'll see where it goes from there.
Yeah, sure. Just can't wait to see how it all unfolds. This first phase has been an absolute treat. Adventures, Trail of Shadows, can't wait to see how those wrap up. Can't wait to read Midnight Horizon, obviously. But Daniel, what's upcoming for you? We know we've got a comic coming up in the next phase. But yeah, where can people find you? And also, I was wondering, could you recommend any Daniel José Older books that maybe aren't in the Star Wars universe, but you think Star Wars fans might enjoy?
Definitely. Thank you for that. So let's see. Social media first. On Twitter, I'm at DJ Older. On Instagram, I'm at Daniel Jose 1. And on TikTok, I'm at Daniel Jose Older. They're supposed to all be the same, but they're not.
Yeah.
Um,
Link in the description. Go check it
Link in
out.
the description. The best place to find my work and all of those links is danieljoseolder.net, where you can find all my books, a blog about when I was a paramedic back in New York City. I also have some online writing classes posted through a site called Skillshare that is me teaching some fundamentals of narrative structure and stuff like that, which is really cool. All that's on my website. Other question. Oh, non-Star Wars stuff. So yeah, let's do Star Wars stuff first. In phase 2, I'm writing an original graphic novel. The Adventures line is moving over to Dark Horse, and it's going into the graphic novel format rather than monthlies. I have something really, really cool that I can't talk about cooking, but it's great for that. Trust me on that. Non-Star Wars stuff. So my next young adult novel is called Ballad and Dagger, and it comes out from Rick Riordan's imprint of Disney in May 3rd. And man, I love this book. Actually, this is sitting on my desk. This is a sketch of the magical island that is featured in the book.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so it's about this. It takes place in Brooklyn. It's in a diaspora community in Brooklyn of people that come from this island called San Madrigal, that was basically a home of pirates, of Sephardic Jews, and of Santeros from Cuba, who were all escaping from different forces of empire. And the island sank 15 years before the book starts, and that everyone ended up in Brooklyn, and they all brought all of their different gods and demons and saints and spirits and everything else and songs. And we follow this one kid, Mateo, who's a piano player, who kind of is like the local troubadour who plays for all the different events. And he finds out he's connected to this healer god. All this stuff goes wrong. There's fighting in the streets. There's true love. There's pirates. It's a really fun book. Ballad and Dagger comes out May 3rd.
Awesome. That sounds like a movie actually that I'd want to watch and stuff. But I'll read the book instead.
Awesome. Excellent. That's great.
Well, Daniel Jose Older, thank you once again for coming on and joining us. And everyone else, listen, we're going to be talking about Midnight Horizon later on. We broke down the Fallen Star. We made a review, did a whole discussion about that. I think, how long was it? Like an hour or an hour and 20 minutes?
Yeah.
So
to talk about.
We're definitely going to break down Midnight Horizon. So stay tuned. Make sure you hit the subscribe button wherever you're listening, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Stay in because we're talking about the High Republic. Listen, High Republic may be taking a break, but we're not. We're still going to be talking about all the things that are coming out and going back and talking about, other things, going back and rereading some things too. So stay tuned. So yeah, Ari, where can people find you, sir?
Yep, find me on Instagram at @Star_Exchange and at Twitter, the SW Exchange.
Awesome. And you guys can find me always at @all_Star Wars on Twitter or on Instagram. And as always, may the force be with you. Adios.
For light and life.